네, 안녕하세요, 여러분. 네, 어떻게 지금 잘 보셨어요? 좀 시간 들여서 꼭 볼 보람이 있었죠. 저는 그렇게 봤는데. 자, 그다음에 이제 본격적으로 이제 독점 규제 이야기를 좀 해보도록 하죠. 플랫폼 독점이 문제가 돼요. 플랫폼이라고 하는 것이 이제 서로 다른 이용자 그룹이 거래나 상호작용을 원활하게 할 수 있도록 제공된 물리적, 가상적, 제도적 환경을 이제 플랫폼이라고 하는데요. 플랫폼 같은 경우는 사실 이제 투 사이드예요. 투 사이드. 한 면으로는 사용자가 원하는 콘텐츠나 검색 기능을 제공해서 다수의 사용자를 플랫폼으로 모으고요. 또 다른 측면으로는 또 광고주를 끌어들이는 거죠. 그래서 수익을 추구하는 이제 그런 기업들이 플랫폼 기업들인데, 뭐 에어비앤비, 우버, 구글, 페이스북 이런 것 위에 이제 그림에서 보다시피 막 이 데이터의 바다에서 21세기의 플랫폼 기업들이니까 데이터를 이렇게 기름처럼 끌어올리는 걸 말하는 거죠. 그래서 21세기의 기름을 뭐 데이터라고도 하는데요. 문제는 이제 소비자의 편의만 강조돼서 노동자들의 불안정성이나 분절화, 고립이 심해지고 또 시장의 독점화로 인한 문제가 심각해질 가능성이 있다. 그리고 결과적으로 이제 데이터를 독점하는 기업들은 데이터 독과점으로 인해서 이제 데이터 자본주의로 간다는 거죠. 그래서 결과적으로 이제 우리가 이제 디지털 트랜스포메이션, 디지털 경제가 이제 혁신을 강조하는데 결국에는 혁신을 또 오히려 저해하는 그런 측면이 있다는 거죠. 그래서 그 해결책으로는 뭐 데이터 공유 문제 또는 공유 경제와 또 협동조합을 접목한 플랫폼 협동주의 등을 내세우고 있습니다. 그래서 이 플랫폼 협동주의에 대해서 좀 알아보도록 하죠. 플랫폼 독점을 해결할 수 있는 수단이죠. 그래서 이 플랫폼 협동주의라는 것은 이제 플랫폼 코퍼레이티비즘이라고 하는 건데요. 우버나 에어비앤비가 활용하는 디지털 플랫폼 기술적인 그런 부분은 수용하되 이제 거버넌스 자체를 민주적으로 바꾸는 거예요. 그래서 이 플랫폼의 소유와 운영에 대해서 사회적인 연대를 최우선적으로 하고 소수의 이익이 아니라 공동의 이익이라는 관점에서 혁신과 효율성 개념을 다시 재설정하는 그 설정하는 과정에서 이제 같이 설정하는 이제 그런 개념이 들어간다는 거죠. 여러분들이 이제 협동주의 사실은 이제 그 우리도 보면 독과점 기업이 있을 때 독과점을 상당히 좀 제어할 수 있는 그런 기업 형태가 있었어요. 그게 바로 우리 협동조합이라는 건데요. 요즘 이제 협동조합과 이제 사회적 경제라는 말을 많이 하죠. 그래서 이 협동조합은 언제 시작이 됐냐면 1845년에 영국의 로치데일이라는 지역이 있어요. 우리가 뭐 그 맨체스터라고 하는 도시는 알 거예요, 그죠? 맨체스터에서 한국인 그 박지성 선수가 우리 명지대 그죠? 출신이죠. 선수가 뛰었는데 그 근처 맨체스터 근처 로치데일이라고 하는 이제 그 당시에 조그마한 이제 산업 도시가 있었어요. 그 로치데일에서 이제 산업혁명이 아주 심하게 일어났죠. 그런데 이제 심하게라는 표현은 이제 그만큼 공장 노동자들이 굉장히 힘들게 살았다는 얘기예요. 그래서 어, 그 당시에 이제 그런 기업들이 많이 독과점을 추구하면서 소비자들의 삶이 굉장히 어려웠습니다. 그때 협동조합이 이제 1845년에 영국에서 탄생하게 돼요. 그러면서 그 협동조합의 이름이 로치데일 파이오니어스거든요. 로치데일 개척자라는 뜻이죠. 여기 이것과 관련한 영상이 있는데요. 여러분들이 협동조합이 돼서 이것이 정말 인간의 발명품 치고는 괜찮은 괜찮은 정도가 아니죠. 아주 훌륭한 그런 시장 경제 모델로서 시장 경제 기업으로서 독과점을 제어할 수 있는 그런 기업이구나라는 걸 알게 될 겁니다. 그래서 이 영상을 한번 같이 보도록 하죠. 네, 좀 방식을 바꿔서 제가 한번 이게 기록 일단
Cooperation is as old as humanity, and records exist for people working cooperatively right back to the 1760s. But the cooperative movement as we know it today began right here on Todd Lane in Rochdale. Life was hard in the 1840s. There were few jobs for the weavers, people were hungry, and life expectancy was very low. People were often in debt to shopkeepers, who sold poor quality food. This cooperatively owned shop was set up by 28 working people in 1844 who wanted to be able to buy honest food at honest prices. They saved up until they could afford to open a shop and transported their first goods by wheelbarrow all the way from Manchester. This group became known as the Rochdale Pioneers. They had butter, flour, oatmeal, sugar, and candles. The gas company thought the co-op shop would not be able to pay their bills, and so wouldn't supply them with gas. So the pioneers had to use the candles to light the shop the very first opening night at 8 p.m. on the 21st of December 1844. The Rochdale Pioneers were inspired by Robert Owen and used his ideas to create the cooperative values. Anyone could join the cooperative by paying £1, regardless of their religion, politics, or job, and each person had one vote. They sold pure goods, and the shop profits were shared with the members as dividends. After 1 year, they had 74 members, and by 1860 this had grown to 3,450 members and 6 new stores. The idea of co-ops was spreading across the country, and in 1863 the Cooperative Wholesale Society was formed, buying in bulk to supply stock to the growing number of shops. This became the Cooperative Group. Most co-ops had a reading room above the shop that members could use, as education was seen as very important for all. In the Rochdale Pioneers Cooperative, many men and women had their first opportunity to take part in voting, years before general elections were in existence. Women were welcome in cooperatives from the very beginning, given equal voting rights, and were allowed to sign for their dividend. A minimum wage was implemented in 1907, 90 years before becoming law in the UK, and cooperatives were often ahead of their time when it came to issues like pensions and working conditions. Workers at a cooperative factory in Crumpsall had a piano, library, and even a football club at work, and they were the first biscuit makers in the country to work an 8-hour day. Employees even got a wedding cake given to them by the factory when they got married. Cooperatives are famous for caring for their members, even looking after the families of soldiers by continuing to pay their salaries whilst at war and assuring them jobs on their return home. Cooperatives spread worldwide and now have 1 billion members. From bankers and grocers to snake catchers and taxi drivers, more than 120 million people now work cooperatively. From the introduction of the Fair Trade Mark in 1994, cooperatives have been committed to stocking fair trade products, helping to support millions of food growers in developing countries. The massive impact of the actions of those 28 people back in 1844 has influenced a global movement, a new way of living and working. The original shop on Toad Lane has been preserved as a museum, so you can come and find out about cooperation, share cooperative stories, and discover more about the Rochdale Pioneers. You can check out the website to have a virtual tour of the Toad Lane Museum, or come and visit in person. The Cooperative Heritage Trust has recognised the relevance of cooperation in today's society, and with your help can continue to develop the Rochdale Pioneers Museum and National Cooperative Archive at this important time, so we can all inspire future generations. 21st century pioneers have a unique opportunity to make a significant contribution to safeguarding the future of cooperation and to improve our lives and the lives of others. It's now our time to make a difference as we move towards a brighter, more cooperative future.
네, 여러분 어떻게 잘 보셨어요? 이게 협동조합이 또 우리 독과점, 우리 경쟁법에서는 굉장히 중요한 이슈이기도 하고요. 우리나라에 있는 협동조합들도 이제 이런 기능을 담당하고, 최근에 이제 협동조합 기본법이라든지 사회적 경제 기본법을 정부에서 마련해서 이런 협동조합과 사회적 경제를 통한 어떤 시장 경쟁의 촉진 또는 소비자 보호에 앞장서고 있답니다. 여러분들도 이 플랫폼 요즘 그 기업들의 어떤 독과점 문제가 점점 심해지고 있죠. 데이터 독점이라는 이런 문제를 해결하는 어떤 대안으로서 플랫폼 협동주의 꼭 기억을 해두시고, 또 플랫폼 협동조합 운동이 전 세계적으로 퍼져나가고 있다는 것도 알아두시길 바랍니다. 네, 이것과 관련해서 이것은 나중에 좀 봐도 될 것 같은데요. 근데 나중에가 있을까 모르겠는데 일단 우리 할 내용이 좀 있으니까 일단 이 부분은 뒤로 넘어가도록 하고요. 자, 인공지능과 노동법 문제를 좀 먼저 다뤄보도록 합시다. 자, 한번 사례를 한번 읽어볼까요? 배달 앱을 이용하여 배달 대행업을 영위하는 배달 대행 업체에 소속되어 배달 업무를 수행하던 배달 기사 A는 여러분들이 이제 배달의 민족 뭐 그런 걸 떠올리시면 될 겁니다. 무단 횡단을 하던 보행자와 충돌하는 사고를 당하였다. 달하였다가 아니고 당하였다라고 고쳐야 되겠네요. A는 업무상 재해를 이유로 산업재해 보상급여를 받았고 근로복지공단은 그 A에게 지급한 급여액의 50%를 배달대행업체에 청구하였다. 그러나 배달대행업체, 이제 배달민족 같은 데죠. A와 근로계약서를 작성하지도 않았고 근로소득세도 납부하지도 않았고 4대 보험에도 가입하지 않았다는 사실과 함께 A는 배당 요청의 선택권이 있고 배달 요청이죠. 배달 요청의 선택권이 있고 요청을 거절하더라도 제재가 없으며 다른 회사의 배달 업무를 수행하는 것이 가능하고 그러니까 꼭 우리 업체를 하는 것이 아니라 다른 데도 가능하다는 거죠. 그리고 급여는 배달 건수만으로 결정되므로 근로기준법상의 근로자가 아니다. 그래서 근로복지공단에서 청구한 급여액을 부담할 수 없다고 주장한다. A는 배달 대행업자의 근로자로 인정받을 수 있을까요? 뭐 그런 문제가 있어요. 여러분 어떻게 생각하시나요? 이게 좀 많이 사회 문제가 되는데요. 자, 사업자의 플랫폼을 이용하여 수익을 얻는 사람들, 이른바 이제 플랫폼 노동자예요. 그런 사람은 근로자도 아니고 자영업자도 아니죠. 그렇기 때문에 근로기준법이 적용되지 않는다라고 합니다. 뭐 물론 이 사람들이 이제 개인 사업자로 등록을 하고 그래서 그렇죠. 그래서 이들에게 적용되는 법은 지금 없어요. 그렇기 때문에 이것도 아직 명확한 답은 없다라고 볼 수 있어요. 자, 이 문제와 관련해 가지고 여기 몇 가지 이제 생각해 볼 게 있는데요. 과연 우리가 이제 인공지능, 즉 로봇이 우리의 직업을 대체할 수 있을까라고 하는 앤드루 메가피의 일단 이 영상을 보고 나서 현실적인 또 법적인 문제에 다시 돌아가 보도록 합시다. 자, 그러면 일단 이렇게 다시 아까처럼
As it turns out, when tens of millions of people are unemployed or underemployed, there's a fair amount of interest in what technology might be doing to the labor force. And as I look at the conversation, it strikes me that it's focused on exactly the right topic, and at the same time, it's missing the point entirely. The topic that it's focused on, the question is whether or not all these digital technologies are affecting people's ability to earn a living, or to say it a little bit different way, are the droids taking our jobs? And there's some evidence that they are. The Great Recession ended when American GDP resumed its kind of slow, steady march upward. And some other economic indicators also started to rebound, and they got kind of healthy kind of quickly. Corporate profits are quite high. In fact, if you include bank profits, they're higher than they've ever been. And business investment in gear, in equipment and hardware and software is at an all-time high. So the businesses are getting out their checkbooks. What they're not really doing is hiring. So this red line is the employment to population ratio. In other words, the percentage of working age people in America who have work. And we see that it cratered during the Great Recession, and it hasn't started to bounce back at all. But the story is not just a recession story. The decade that we've just been through had relatively anemic job growth all throughout, especially when we compare it to other decades. And the 2000s are the only time we have on record where there were fewer people working at the end of the decade than at the beginning. This is not what you want to see. When you graph the number of potential employees versus the number of jobs in the country, you see the gap gets bigger and bigger over time. And then during the Great Recession, it opened up in a huge way. I did some quick calculations. I took the last 20 years of GDP growth and the last 20 years of labor productivity growth and used those in a fairly straightforward way to try to project how many jobs the economy was going to need to keep growing. And this is the line that I came up with. Is that good or bad? This is the government's projection for the working age population going forward. So if these predictions are accurate, that gap is not going to close. The problem is, I don't think these projections are accurate. In particular, I think my projection is way too optimistic, because when I did it, I was assuming that the future was kind of going to look like the past with labor productivity growth, and that's actually not what I believe. Because when I look around, I think that we ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to technology's impact on the labor force. Just in the past couple of years, we've seen digital tools display skills and abilities that they never, ever had before, and that kind of eat deeply into what we human beings do for a living. Let me give you a couple examples. Throughout all of history, if you wanted something translated from one language into another, you had to involve a human being. Now we have multi-language, instantaneous, automatic translation services available for free via many of our devices all the way down to smartphones. And if any of us have used these, we know that they're not perfect, but they're decent. Throughout all of history, if you wanted something written, a report or an article, you had to involve a person. Not anymore. This is an article that appeared in Forbes Online a while back about Apple's earnings. It was written by an algorithm. And it's not decent, it's perfect. A lot of people look at this and they say, okay, but those are very specific, narrow tasks, and most knowledge workers are actually generalists. And what they do is sit on top of a very large body of expertise and knowledge, and they use that to react on the fly to kind of unpredictable demands, and that's very, very hard to automate. One of the most impressive knowledge workers in recent memory is a guy named Ken Jennings. He won the quiz show Jeopardy! 74 times in a row, took home $3 million. That's Ken on the right getting beat 3-1 by Watson, the Jeopardy-playing supercomputer from IBM. So when we look at what technology can do to general knowledge workers, I start to think there might not be something so special about this idea of a generalist, particularly when we start doing things like hooking Siri up to Watson and having technologies that can understand what we're saying and repeat speech back to us. Now, Siri is far from perfect, and we can make fun of her flaws, but we should also keep in mind that if technologies like Siri and Watson improve along a Moore's Law trajectory, which they will, in 6 years, they're not going to be 2 times better or 4 times better. They'll be 16 times better than they are right now. So I start to think that a lot of knowledge work is going to be affected by this. And digital technologies are not just impacting knowledge work, they're starting to flex their muscles in the physical world as well. I had the chance a little while back to ride in the Google autonomous car, which is as cool as it sounds. And I will vouch that it handled the stop-and-go traffic on US 101 very smoothly. There are about 3.5 million people who drive trucks for a living in the United States. I think some of them are going to be affected by this technology. And right now, humanoid robots are still incredibly primitive. They can't do very much, but they're getting better quite quickly. And DARPA, which is the investment arm of the Defense Department, is trying to accelerate their trajectory. So in short, yeah, the droids are coming for our jobs. In the short term, we can stimulate job growth by encouraging entrepreneurship and by investing in infrastructure, because the robots today still aren't very good at fixing bridges. But in the not too long term, I think within the lifetimes of most of the people in this room, we're going to transition into an economy that is very productive, but that just doesn't need a lot of human workers. And managing that transition is going to be the greatest challenge that our society faces. Voltaire summarized why. He said, work saves us from 3 great evils: boredom, vice, and need. But despite this challenge, I'm still a huge digital optimist, and I am supremely confident that the digital technologies that we're developing now are going to take us into a utopian future, not a dystopian future. And to explain why, I want to pose kind of a ridiculously broad question. I want to ask, what have been the most important developments in human history? Now, I want to share some of the answers that I've got in response to this question. It's a wonderful question to ask and to start an endless debate about, because some people are going to bring up systems of philosophy in both the West and the East that have changed how a lot of people think about the world. And then other people will say, no, actually, the big stories, the big developments are the founding of the world's major religions, which have changed civilizations and have changed and influenced how countless people are living their lives. And then some other folk will say, Actually, what changes civilizations, what modifies them, and what changes people's lives are empires. So the great developments in human history are stories of conquest and of war. And then some cheery soul usually always pipes up and says, hey, don't forget about plagues. There are some optimistic answers to this question. So some people will bring up the age of exploration and the opening up of the world. Others will talk about intellectual achievements in disciplines like math that have helped us get a better handle on the world. And other folk will talk about periods when there was a deep flourishing of the arts and sciences. So this debate will go on and on. It's an endless debate, and there's no conclusive, no single answer to it. But if you're a geek like me, you say, well, what do the data say? And you start to do things like graph and things that we might be interested in, the total worldwide population, for example, or some measure of social development or the state of advancement of a society. And you start to plot the data, because by this approach, the big stories, the big developments in human history are the ones that will bend these curves a lot. So when you do this and when you plot the data, you pretty quickly come to some weird conclusions. You conclude actually that none of these things have mattered very much. Hey, they haven't done a darn thing to the curves. There has been one story, one development in human history that bent the curve, bent it just about 90 degrees, and it is a technology story. The steam engine and the other associated technologies of the Industrial Revolution changed the world and influenced human history so much that, in the words of the historian Ian Morris, they made mockery out of all that had come before. And they did this by infinitely multiplying the power of our muscles, overcoming the limitations of our muscles. Now, what we're in the middle of now is overcoming the limitations of our individual brains and infinitely multiplying our mental power. How can this not be as big a deal as overcoming the limitations of our muscles? So at the risk of repeating myself a little bit, when I look at what's going on with digital technology these days, we are not anywhere near through with this journey. And when I look at what is happening to our economies and our societies, my single conclusion is that we ain't seen nothing yet. The best days are really ahead. Let me give you a couple examples. Economies don't run on energy. They don't run on capital. They don't run on labor. Economies run on ideas. So the work of innovation, the work of coming up with new ideas, is some of the most powerful, some of the most fundamental work that we can do in an economy. And this is kind of how we used to do innovation. We'd find a bunch of fairly similar looking people. We'd take them out of elite institutions, we'd put them into other elite institutions, and we'd wait for the innovation. Now, as a white guy who spent his whole career at MIT and Harvard, I got no problem with this. But some other people do, and they've kind of crashed the party and loosened up the dress code of innovation. So here are the winners of a top quarter programming challenge, and I assure you that nobody cares where these kids grew up, where they went to school, or what they look like. All anyone cares about is the quality of the work, the quality of the ideas. And over again, we see this happening in the technology-facilitated world. The work of innovation is becoming more open, more inclusive, more transparent, and more merit-based. And that's going to continue no matter what MIT and Harvard think of it, and I couldn't be happier about that development. I hear once in a while, okay, I'll grant you that, but technology is still a tool for the rich world. And what's not happening, these digital tools are not improving the lives of people at the bottom of the pyramid. And I want to say to that very clearly, nonsense. The bottom of the pyramid is benefiting hugely from technology. The economist Robert Jensen did this wonderful study a while back where he watched in great detail what happened to the fishing villages of Kerala, India, when they got mobile phones for the very first time. And when you write for the Quarterly Journal of Economics, you have to use very dry and very circumspect language. But when I read his paper, I kind of feel Jensen is trying to scream at us and say, look, this was a big deal. Prices stabilized so people could plan their economic lives. Waste was not reduced, it was eliminated, and the lives of both the buyers and the sellers in these villages measurably improved. Now, what I don't think is that Jensen got extremely lucky and happened to land in the one set of villages where technology made things better. What happened instead is he very carefully documented what happens over and over again when technology comes for the first time to an environment and a community. The lives of people, the welfares of people improve dramatically. So as I look around at all the evidence and I think about the room that we have ahead of us, I become a huge digital optimist, and I start to think that this wonderful statement from the physicist Freeman Dyson is actually not hyperbole. This is an accurate assessment of what's going on. Our technologies are great gifts, and we right now have the great good fortune to be living at a time when digital technology is flourishing, when it is broadening and deepening and becoming more profound all around the world. So yeah, the droids are taking our jobs, but focusing on that fact misses the point entirely. The point is that then we are freed up to do other things. And what we're going to do, I am very confident, what we're going to do is reduce poverty and drudgery and misery around the world. I'm very confident we're going to learn to live more lightly on the planet, and I am extremely confident that what we're going to do with our new digital tools is going to be so profound and so beneficial that it's going to make a mockery out of everything that came before. I'm going to leave the last word to a guy who had a front row seat for digital progress, our old friend Ken Jennings. I'm with him. I'm going to echo his words. I, for one, welcome our new computer overlords. Thanks very much.